This video will help you to better understand Step 2 Inventing of the SPOT online tutorial. Specifically, this video will examine the explorative essay that you're being asked to write, identifying key features and purposes behind the explorative essay. This should help you write this very special kind of essay. A lot of students, largely because of the ways they've been trained to write in the past, think of writing as the mere conveyance of knowledge. You write an essay to prove you know something. You read sources so that you can fill in the blank or plug in a quote that shows you know what you're talking about. This way of writing includes nothing more than sitting down one afternoon and carefully crafting an answer to a question that's been posed to you. However, academics don't normally engage in this kind of writing, and SPOT is not asking this of you either. Writing to demonstrate knowledge is the stuff of high schools and encyclopedias. Rather, at the college level, writing becomes more about exploring, asking questions, inquiring into complicated and difficult to address issues. In short, writing is often a method or process for learning what we think about a subject, a text, or an idea, and what questions we might pose in order to understand those subjects, texts, and ideas better. This kind of writing can be more difficult, since it requires that you have a grasp of the kinds of questions being asked and the kinds of topics being written about in your field. This is what you accomplished in Step 1. You looked at the research of it on a particular topic, then summarized those voices in a reading document, paying close attention to the rhetoric of each source, that is, paying attention to how each text makes its meaning or argues its points. For Step 2, you now must look at all this information gathered so that you can do something with it, so that you can begin to ask rhetorically based questions about it. The cool part about this kind of writing, as opposed to writing to demonstrate knowledge, is that you don't necessarily have to know exactly what you want to say or what questions you want to explore before you start writing. The whole point of the explorative essay is the exploration itself, the discussion of what you see in the sources you're using, and what interesting questions or ideas come to mind. However, in Unit 1, you are also asked to explore the rhetorical aspects of these texts and ideas. In other words, you are exploring a research question you can ask yourself that will lead to an investigation of how the writers in this discipline make the kind of arguments they make, and how those arguments are either persuasive or not so. With this in mind, try not to get too stressed over having a concrete question in mind by the time you get to the end of the essay. Ideally, you want to have some sense of what interests you and what question about the rhetoric of the topic you want to address, but you don't need to have a polished question. The idea is to simply start writing about it, to explore through your writing what questions exist that may be worth exploring and that you, your peers, and your writing mentor can work with to find you a good research question. Simply put, the purpose of this explorative essay is to give you a way to find a research question that you can then write an academic research paper on. Remember that the questions and ideas you want to explore should deal with the rhetoric of the sources you're using, or how those sources make the arguments that they do. A good way to begin this essay, then, is to look back at your reading document and consider how you see those sources acting rhetorically. From here, you can begin to explore and ask questions about the rhetoric of your field. To do this, follow the guidelines in the Products page's Explorative Essay section. There, you'll see a three-part structure, which is really just a way to invent your draft, or to start writing. It begins with what you know about the subject. That is, at this point, what is most important about all that research you just did? What ideas or questions or evidences seem most intriguing to you? Once you've written about that and exhausted all the things that interest you, then move to the second part that asks you to wonder out loud. What do you find most interesting about the discussions you just wrote about? Are there places that you'd like to know more about, where the authors may have not made a strong argument, or where the argument could be reasonably debated? Or maybe there are interesting places in several texts that make arguments in interesting ways, provocative ways, or powerful ways. How do they do this in each case? Finally, the last step in the process of drafting the essay is to consider all that you've just written and look for a question or two that you hear underneath all this interesting stuff. One about rhetoric, that is, the language and other elements on the pages of those articles. If you are not sure, talk about that in the final section of your essay. What kinds of rhetorical questions are most interesting? If you need to, you may want to look again at Step 1's background section, where rhetoric is discussed and defined. In the next video, we'll go over an example explorative essay discussing its features and what process you have to go through to complete Step 2, Inventing.